Hey guys, we're going to be going over 12.2. You'll want to make sure, before anything, when you're communicating orally, you want to make sure that your message is clear, accurate, and memorable. And your word choice should be very specific, concrete, simple, and correct. Now, specific and concrete words, the terms are interchangeable for this. They're words that appeal to our five senses, whereas general words would often be abstract and referring to ideas or qualities. The more concrete your words, the clearer your communication becomes, and your specific words will create very memorable images. For instance, if I were to say a Eevee, that's very specific. If any of you have background in Pokemon, you'll automatically picture this little guy. And then, if you get more abstract from the Eevee, it gets Pokemon, digital creature, and like animated fantasy character. That's very abstract and you can picture a lot of things, but in reality, if I were trying to be as specific as possible, I would just say Eevee or Pokemon. Then you also want to use very simple words. You don't want to try to impress people with very pompous language because they may just think you're being arrogant. That's not cool. George Orwell said a quote that looked very important, and it was, "Never use a long word where a short one will do. If it's possible to cut a word out, always cut it out. Never use a foreign phrase, a scientific word, or a jargon word if you can think of an everyday English equivalent." It also mentions that you should be making audio and visual recordings, so that way you can review your practice sessions and listen for spots where you could express yourself in much simpler language. Then it also says that we should be using words correctly. What this means is we have to know the difference between denotation and connotation of words, because the denotation is the dictionary definition of a word. For instance, notorious means famous, but the connotation, on the other hand, is the meaning we associate with that word, based off of our prior experience and knowledge. And when I say notorious, that's a word that's generally associated with a negative connotation, and usually it means that someone is famous for doing something bad, not necessarily just famous, as the dictionary definition would say. So then, it also says you want to use your words concisely. That doesn't mean short, it just means to the point. You only want to use the amount of words necessary to get your point across. You want to very much eliminate those words and phrases that add no meaning to your message. Those could be like, "in my opinion," and all that, when all is said and done. "As a matter of fact, and before I begin, I'd like to say." Those words are called cliches. They're overused expressions that add really nothing to your form of communication, and even occasionally irritate people, so you want to stray away from them. Then you also want to avoid narrating your speaking technique. Don't say, "here's an interesting story." Just tell the story. Signposts are internal summaries, and they're important throughout your message that the audience can follow along because of them. But you don't want to overcrowd your speech with them, because then you're just revealing everything about your technique. That's not as good, not as effective. Also, generally you just want to avoid long phrases when short ones will do. The examples it listed were, instead of saying, "so for that reason, so." But at the same time, but. In today's society, today. Due to the fact that, because, in the course of, during, and in final analysis, finally. If you eliminate those long phrases, you will lose a bit of time, but all in all, it'll be worth it because it'll be a lot more effective as a speaker.